Hey, you guys. It is your girl, Tina Wolf. This morning I woke up and scrolled through my Facebook, watched a lot of good things. And then I was just like, blah, 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 blah. So I just thought I would blah, blah, blah with y'all. So, the last couple of days, as I have been driving like around the city, I've been seeing a lot of places from my past that held significance for me. And when you go down memory lane, so to speak, right? Sometimes it can be challenging because the memory is good, and sometimes it can be challenging because the memory is like not so good. But yesterday, as I was going, the memories reminded me of places that I was at when I didn't know what forgiveness was. And then I know you're like, Tina, what? And I'm like, just hold on, just give me a minute. So for me, when I was in my 20s, I went by this place in Bachman Lake, and I had to move in there because I needed a place. I needed a place for my children and I to be. And the way that I ended up in this position was that my first husband and I, it was due to mental illness. We had to, unfortunately, separate. And my heart went out to him because before then he was a great husband and great dad. We never hardly argued or anything like that, but mental illness overtook him because he overworked. He was working 3 jobs. He wasn't taking care of himself. He didn't want me to work. He wanted to take care of his family. So, but the consequence of that, with the factor of other things, anyway, caused a break in his mental health. So we couldn't be together. Me being a young mother with no GED, no nothing, because I didn't mean I wasn't smart. It was just meant I didn't have a GED. I went and stayed with his mother. I know that sounds like really crazy, but I went and stayed with his mother. And then I decided I wanted to go stay with my mom for a little while because me and my mother-in-law got into it. And then when I went to stay with my mom, I didn't know about getting a job or anything like that. But anyway, let me just say, Mama's like, you can stay as long as you like, but she has her ways to make you go, Hey, Brandon, oh my God, I haven't seen you in a while. Hey, keep going is definitely the message. And so I finally found a job. I was getting at that time like $255 a month Social Security, because remember, my first husband, he had like a little bit of mental illness going on. So I automatically got Social Security. So with the $255 a month, and with the first job that I had as a single mother working for Burger King, right, I moved and found this place at the Bachman Lake area. When I found the place, I went back to my mother-in-law and said, hey, I want to get my things, me and my boys' things. I want to get the things. She would not let me get it. I lost everything. I had nothing. And it hurt my feelings because I couldn't understand how you're going to say you love me and you love my kids, but you wouldn't even give me their diapers, their clothes, or just nothing. You would give me nothing. And so when I say I had to start from scratch, I mean I had to start from scratch. People donated to me. People gave to me. And I took things from the trash can. You know how sometimes people take like furniture and stuff like that. Somebody left a couch out there. I took that old couch, I drug it in by myself, young 21-year-old woman, and I drug that couch into the house, and I just created what I could and did what I could with what I had, and what people had donated to me. That was a very pivotal moment, and every time I drive by Bachman Lake, I had never thought about that, but on this particular day, I drove by there and I was like, all those memories came flooding back. It wasn't the emotion of not feeling sad or depressed or anything, but it was a memory of resilience that came to mind. How I was making it off of $255 plus what I was making at Burger King, only God knows. So fast forward, I'm scrolling through Facebook today, and this gentleman is singing this song, which I did post it on my page. And the song was, I can't remember the name of the song, but the lyrics were like, he was like, I know that I can make it. You know, dun, 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 dun. Don't know, can't sing. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, I'll post it in here later because I can't remember, but I did post it on my page. But the main line, I know that I can make it, that whole thing, when he started singing, memories came flourishing back, and it took me back to my 20s and other periods in my life of resilience. My love and coping and understanding of forgiveness, especially in the situation of my first marriage, people didn't understand it. I feel like I've always been blessed with the gift of forgiveness. When people were telling me, you're forgiving, Tina, and you're forgetting. But I don't think forgiving and forgetting are synonymous. Just because I forgive you does not mean that I forget. I definitely remember those lessons. And there is a correlation in the forgiveness. But to me, forgiveness represents not punishing yourself for what was done to you. And learning that came early on for me. I think I learned how to not forgive people as I grew. I know that sounds crazy, but just give me a minute. When the first marriage, like I said, when the first marriage happened, I forgave my husband because that was mental illness. You know, what's funny is people will tell you what they would do and what they're going to do and how I wouldn't do, blah, blah. And they say what they wouldn't do, just like what my first mother-in-law did to me. I wouldn't blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. But you don't know what you would do. It's always easy when you're hearing someone else's story after the fact to say, instead of being resilient, I would have fought. Or I would have never forgiven that person, right? But that didn't come till later on. That's another story time. But I wanted to say that this part of my life, that young part, and I maybe I'm sharing that part that happened because I don't know, maybe somebody went through it or has gone through it. If your marriage or your relationship, or maybe your friendship or with your family, you experienced something that was caused by mental illness. Hey, Gerald, if you was gone, the separation was done due to mental illness, and you're having a hard time with that. Forgiveness means you've learned the lesson and you're able to move forward. Sometimes those things are out of the person's control. I know definitely as a young man, my first husband had no idea what was happening to him. And as a young woman, I had no idea. So why would I hate him? Or why would I hold him hostage to something he had no control over? Right? That was my first experience of going through something traumatically heartbreaking, but being able to move forward and releasing him in peace and love. Now I'm going to fast forward. I was speaking with a friend, and my friend is going through a heartbreak. Okay, I'll say it that way. She's going through heartbreak. Now, fortunately for her, I've gone through a few marriages and relationships, so I definitely am familiar with heartbreak and what that is and what it feels like and how to move forward, right? But any of us that have been through heartbreak, we all process differently, and I want to respect everybody's space. But this is the number one thing that I learned, and I shared this with her because she is heterosexual. So there is this feeling, especially from other women, that when they go through a breakup, that the man does not care. I used to think that too. I know. Men are human beings. I had to continually say this. Men are human beings. They have feelings. And just like you're going through it, just because it's quiet on the other end doesn't mean that men are not going through feelings and emotions. Doesn't mean he doesn't miss you. Doesn't mean he doesn't regret his decision. Doesn't mean that he doesn't not regret his decision. Right? I know how it feels when you want to get back with someone and you're the only party that feels that way. So day before, I'm cleaning through my thing and I'm reading through the book, The Four Agreements. And it said something, and I'm going to read it just because that's how I'm feeling. But I read through something that just confirmed everything that I was telling her, right? I know in this case, I don't know how this is going to bridge together, but I'm just going off of what I feel like I should be sharing, right? Because if somebody has mental illness, you can't get mad at them for going through mental illness or having a mental break, right? And then y'all break up. And maybe that's why this message is here. Or maybe y'all need space or separation. But what I told her was, you just got to give him space. You got to give him space. And you got to do it with peace, love, and grace. That man is probably going through things that he doesn't want you to see because he has to work on himself first. And although it is very heartbreaking, you have to take this time to work on you also. It doesn't mean that you're not, everything is your fault. And that's the biggest message is, don't feel like everything is your fault, right? But there are things that you can work on, right? Now this piece that I'm going to read, this part that I'm going to read to y'all, this goes back, and I have taught about this, and I've also learned this. When we meet people, sometimes we love so many things about them, and we're in the honeymoon phase with them, but then we forget, or or we choose to not acknowledge the things that are about them that rub us the wrong way, or that, we don't like, right? And we tolerate certain behaviors and put up with it, right? Because it's the old, what people are familiar with, the old 80-20 rule. I go back and forth with the 80-20 rule, but because sometimes that 20% is really the 80, if you know what I mean. So I don't know how to tie this in with the mental illness experience, but I'm just going to read it anyway, and maybe it'll come together. Usually it all comes together. Okay. So if you have the book, The 4 Agreements, I am on page 70. And what it says is, often you go into a relationship with someone you like. You have to justify why you like the person. You only see what you want to see, and you deny there are things you don't like about that person. And that's what we're talking about, the part that you're denying. With my first husband, though he had all these great things, the overworking was a bit much. The workaholic part was a bit much, a little bit, and the drinking. But because I loved him, I stayed. Okay. It says you lie to yourself to make yourself right. Then you make assumptions, and one assumption is, my love will change this person. As a young woman being with him from my teens into my early 20s, I definitely thought, because I loved him and he loved me, that the more that some men will call it nagging, the more I brought this to his attention, that maybe he would change it, right? And you don't want to be a person that gives up on somebody because they have a problem, right? It says, my love will change this person, but this is not true. Your love will not change anybody. If others change, it's because they want to change, not because you can change them. This is the key part. This is the key component right here. You love me, you would stop doing ABC. We've all said it. We've all done it. We may not still do it, but at one point in time, we have said this. I know early in my 20s, I used to say this all the time, right? If others change, it's because they want to change, not because you can change them. Then something happens between the two of you and you get hurt. Suddenly, you see what you didn't want to see before. Only now it's amplified by your emotional poison. Ooh, let's address the emotional poison. Now you have to justify your emotional pain and blame them for your choices. When they're talking about you blaming the other person for your choices, in other words, you chose to be with this person, and now that you're having this unpleasant experience, you want to blame them for how you feel. Ooh, that's a slippery slope, because it can go both ways. Now, I do feel like, and this is probably wrong, but not to me. The first time you hurt my feelings, you're responsible. And we need to have a discussion. But the second time you do it, usually there are signs, because you've already hurt me once. So now my guard is up, right? Or my protection is in place, or my boundary is in place. And I know the pattern. Unless they do something different, I'm familiar with the pattern that they are going to repeat the offense. And this is where, right here, they're talking about, suddenly you see what you didn't want to see before, and now it's amplified by your emotional poison. Now you have to justify your emotional pain and blame them for your choices. Well, all I wanted was this, and you didn't do this, but they displayed this the first time. So now that they're getting ready to go into the second pattern, now it's time to recognize the pattern. You see it coming. but you don't do anything about it. And sometimes the person even tells us that it's coming, and we don't want to accept it because we love that person so much. We love them so much, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to see it, right? We don't want to give up. It says we don't need to justify love. It is there or not there. Real love is accepting other people the way they are. This is the important part. Real love is accepting other people the way they are without trying to change them. I've had in this current single life, when I'm meeting people, meeting men, if they're not how I need them to be, I don't try to change them. This is what you call getting to know you process. If you're already doing the things that are compatible or in alignment with me, then it makes the process a lot easier. Are there going to be some things that we're not aligned on? Yes. But I guess this is where people are saying the 80-20 rule comes in. Is this something that you can deal with? If he goes hiking every Sunday, or goes running every Sunday, or playing golf every Sunday, or watching TV every Sunday and doesn't want to go anywhere, and he tells you this is something he's been doing for the last 30 years, are you okay with not going somewhere on a Sunday? Especially if he's not willing to compromise. Because if not, then later on down the road, Sunday's going to be an argument. Sundays are going to be an argument. And I'm just simplifying it. Okay. If we try to change them, this means we really don't like them. Me trying to convince somebody to do the right thing and do what I want them to do, to answer how I want them to answer, and give me what I want, the results are not going to last. It's going to be temporary. And the reason it's going to be temporary is because it's not that person's idea. It's not natural for them to do that. So if you're trying to convince the person, and let's say the person does try it and they change and they go revert back to what they're doing, now here comes the blame of the choices that you made to try to stay and be patient while the person was trying to do what you were saying. And now you're getting mad because what they're doing is not fast enough for you, or they're not sticking with your request. I know because I have been there. You cannot blame somebody else for your choice to continue to pursue. Can't. I mean, you can, but you're going to continually, it's like putting the Band-Aid on, ripping it off, putting back on, ripping it off, and putting back on, and ripping it back over and over again. It's not good. If we try to change them, this means we really don't like them. Of course, if you decide to live with someone, if you make that agreement, it is always better to make that agreement with someone who is exactly the way you want him or her to be. Find someone whom you do not have to change at all. It is much easier to find someone who is already the way you want him or her to be, instead of trying to change that person. Also, that person must love you just the way you are, so he or she doesn't have to change you at all. If others feel they have to change you, that means they really don't love you just the way you are. So why be with someone if you're not the way he or she wants you to be? That's a tricky thing to say, because there are going to be periods and points where somebody does something that you don't like. Now, if I'm reading this and I'm thinking back to my first marriage, I'm not going to say it's perfect, and there may be some things that I don't recall. because I'm 54 now. It's a long time ago. But the things that I do remember from my first marriage is, although my first husband and I'm sure there were some things that we didn't necessarily agree on, but the majority of it we agreed on. I wanted to be a housewife. He wanted me to be a housewife. He wanted to work and provide. He also wanted to support me in my business. We wanted to have 5 children together. We agreed on the life that we wanted. The only thing I didn't agree was back then he wanted to give me $20 a month. I mean, $20 a week for my allowance, which he was like, you don't need money. If you need something, tell me and we'll just go get it. And we did. We would go get some things, but some things he felt like were unnecessary. But, you know, son, you just want to have your own money. So $20 a week, I mean, in the 80s, is still, I would take the $20 and I would go back and not only not spend it on myself, but I would spend it on him and the kids or going and doing things. And so I used to fix lunch all the time for him. And sometimes I would fix lunch for his coworkers. And then everybody started wanting these meals. And so every Sunday I would cook up meals for like the week, which nowadays we call it meal prep. I would meal prep for the whole week. And my husband said, why don't you start just selling plates? I'll take them to work. I'll come back. You heat everything up for lunch and I'll get it. And I was selling $5 a plate. I mean, to me, my first marriage was the ideal marriage. Everything was brand new. It was my first marriage. It was my first sex. It was my first time being a mother. It was the first time being a business owner. It was the first time being a stay-at-home wife. There were so many firsts, right? The thing that we fought about was the drinking. Here's the 80-20, right? All the other things work. But I felt like we've already talked about in the book, that if he loved me enough, he would change. He would try, but it was hard. I didn't understand then, as a young woman in my 20s, I didn't understand then that sometimes when people drink or they do drugs, that there's something else going on there. Usually there's something that's causing them. There are memories or things, and I was very familiar with his upbringing. So looking back at it now, I can see why he did those things. But as a young woman wanting better for her husband, didn't. I'm the type of woman that I want to support you and help you out of those experiences, and I don't want to give up on you, right? Had it not been for the mental illness and the break, we probably would have been one of those people that was together forever since high school. But mental illness does not give a time limit. It's very inconvenient. It's very inconvenient. And I hated that for him. Okay. So again, I'm just sharing this. I don't know where this is going, but we're going to go with it. Okay, so let me read. So I'm going to back up. It is much easier to find someone who is already the way you want him or her to be instead of trying to change that person. Also, that person must love you just the way you are, so he or she does not have to change you at all. If others feel they have to change you, that means they really don't love you just the way you are. So why be with someone if you're not the way he or she wants you to be? We have to be what we are, so we don't have to present a false image, or as people call the representative, right? If you love me the way I am, okay, quote unquote, okay, take me. If you don't love me the way I am, quote unquote, okay, bye-bye, find someone else, which is easier to say. Easier said than done, as they say. It may sound harsh, but this kind of communication means the personal agreements we make with others are clear and impeccable. Now, I will say, as a 54-year-old, I agree with this statement. As a young woman in the 20s, when I was in my 20s, there's no way you could get me to believe this. Just imagine the day that you stop making assumptions with your partner and eventually with everyone else in your life. Your way of communicating will change completely, and your relationships will no longer suffer from conflicts created by mistaken assumptions. The way to keep yourself from making assumptions is to ask questions. Make sure the communication is clear. If you don't understand, ask. Have the courage to ask questions until you're clear as you can be. And even then, do not assume you know all there is to know about a given situation. Much like with my first husband, with him drinking, I asked him why he gives me an answer, but it's not the answer that I like, And I'm like, if that's your answer, why can't you just stop, right? But there are other things that are underlying. This is the part where if you can't get clarity, this is where you have to choose. You either choose yourself or you choose to stay in the situation. But if you choose to stay in the situation, just know that you may never get the answer. You may never get the answer that you're looking for. It's like, sit with that for a minute. Just sit with that. You may never get the answer you're looking for. Even if y'all get back together or work it out or talk later. Even though my ex-husband had a mental illness, my first one had a mental illness, as a young woman, I wanted to be back with him. And later, I did try. It was sad. The medications they had him on, and I understand. Trust me, I understand the reasons why. But the medications they had him on took him from being a vibrant young man to like a zombie. It was very sad. It was very sad. And of course, most of us, we are taught that when you get married, you should try to make it work and stay together, right? Me not knowing a lot about mental illness and how that particular mental illness worked, I thought maybe if they gave him a magic pill, it would go away. It didn't, right? It made it worse. It made it to where he couldn't even function. I have compassion. Even now, talking to him, even though the things that I experienced when I went through his mental breakdown with him, all the things that happened were not pleasant, but also not his fault. But also I made a choice not to experience that again with him. And I know sometimes that is easier said than done because there are some people that cannot do that. And my heart goes out to you. But I made a choice to choose the safety of myself and my children. Not saying it makes me better than anybody else. But I'm just saying in that particular instance. Right? And no matter what he told me and tried to explain to me, I never quite got it's like, I don't know if this makes sense. I understood why he did what he did, but I didn't understand why he couldn't stop. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm going to read this part and then I'm just going to wind it up because part of me is like having this conversation is kind of pointless, but then I feel like maybe I'm sharing this either so I can watch it later myself in latter years. Hey, latter yourself, if that's what it is. Or maybe someone's going to watch this because they've experienced it or they are experienced it. As I say, I am, I was, I'm about to be. Choose yourself is the message. Choose yourself is the message. This then is the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. Just saying this sounds easy, but I understand that it is difficult too. It is difficult because we are so often do exactly the opposite. We have all these habits and routines that we are not even aware of. Becoming aware of these habits and understanding the importance of this agreement is the first step. But understanding its importance is not enough. Information or an idea is merely the seed in your mind. What will really make the difference is action. Taking the action over and over again strengthens your will, nurtures the seed, and establishes a solid foundation for the new habit to grow. Like I said, you're going to have to be patient during the process. You have to grow the muscle of forgiveness. You have to grow the muscle of understanding. You definitely have to grow the muscle of having clarity for yourself when you don't get the answers you want. And don't start assuming and creating all these ideas of what could be going on, because you're going to be burning a lot of energy and it's not going to be helpful to your growth. After many repetitions, these new agreements will become second nature, and you will see how the magic of your world transforms you from a black magician into a white magician. A white magician uses the word for creation, giving, sharing, and loving. By making this one agreement a habit, your whole life will be completely transformed. When you transform your whole dream, magic just happens in your life. What you need comes to you easily because spirit moves freely through you. This is the mastery of intent, the mastery of spirit, the mastery of love, the mastery of gratitude, and the mastery of life. This is the goal of the Toltec. This is the path to personal freedom. 4 agreements. I hope you guys, hope you guys have a good day. Thank you for listening to my blah blah. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my blah blah. Hopefully this video makes sense or helps somebody. And I'm going to go back and post the song, the video of the man that was singing in here, the gospel song. So anyway, I love you guys. You have an awesome and amazing day. I'm about to get up and get this thing off my head. Love y'all. Bye.